Hey folks, good to see you again, and hello if you're new. If you are new, please subscribe and please also share this video to spread the word. I do still regularly get comments from people saying that this is the first they've heard of any of this, and that is down to Shaun's damage control just going into overdrive. But regardless of that, things are starting to gain a bit of momentum. Just recently, we saw Darren G stepping up as the first bigger name to call Shaun Attwood out very directly, confirming what we've all now suspected for a while, that he is bent as fuck. So Darren G clearly has the strength of character to say what he thinks on this matter, and hopefully this will be the start of a domino effect. There's a noticeable silence when it comes to most of Shaun's other former guests, and it's very, very telling, especially the bigger names. So please do share the video and also, of course, any others on the topic if you think it's worth sharing. At the very least, when people search Shaun Attwood, what we want is for them to see Daddy Gate. And on that, does anyone know if it has been added to Shaun's Wikipedia yet? Because I'm sure it could be, and I certainly think it should be, as it's a documented scandal now. So anyway, onwards with this video. It might actually be quite a long one. There's about 17 or 18 points here. But like many other people, I've been scrutinising the Cali videos with a fine-tooth comb, and a few things have stood out to me. There's a massive number of red flags pointing to the fact that something just ain't right, and I think it's that Cali has just been taken onto the show in order to tell a few stories about her life as a prostitute, embellished with a fake narrative that she's constantly in danger and that she's been victimized in worse ways than she actually has been, uh, basically in an attempt to lead people up the garden path to a Gofundme, which has been designed, in my opinion, to prey on people's good nature and harvest as much money as possible from the pockets of Shaun Attwood's trusting audience. They have already managed to milk over £5,000 so far, which is nice work if you can get it. Now, luckily, the donations have completely dried up. I wonder why that could be. But if they pulled this off properly, they may well have made a lot more than the 10,000 they were asking for. If Shaun was actually as smart as he thinks he is, he could have made tens of thousands of pounds from this. I believe that Shaun Attwood's intention from the start, again, in my opinion, was to set up a GoFundMe and make it look like it wasn't his idea, so he had some level of plausible deniability if the fraudulent aspect of it was found out, i.e. the fact that the story around Cali is not completely true. So I've noted down quite a lot of red flags and I'm just going to go over them in this video. Now the first red flag, it has to be the inappropriate sexual behaviours with Cali. This has, of course, been covered fully, and I'm really not going to get into it again, but very briefly, for anyone who is new to all of this, and I know there are some people who are, Shaun took nude, i.e. naked, explicit photographs and videos of Cali, supposedly a vulnerable woman trying to escape a life of being trafficked and abused. He took these photos and videos of her in his own home. There was photographs of her bent over his balcony in an explicit pose and also carrying out a sex act on herself on his sofa whilst naked. And he also took the infamous Daddy Gate video where Cali is on her knees unzipping Shaun's trousers while dressed as a child for some reason. It's inexplicable as to why she would need to be dressed as a child for that. I cannot understand that part of it myself. I can't understand any of it, but I cannot understand why she would need to be dressed as a child for this video. But these photos and the videos, they were taken and they were posted by Shaun or Cali onto an escorting website, and they were just left there for a few weeks before being discovered and exposed. Shaun then said his explanation for this was that it was a prank. You can check my previous videos for more information on that, but that is certainly the first red flag. You just would not do that with a genuine guest. You would not do that with someone who you were trying to help in your position as an advocate for victims. It's just not something that would be done by any sane person or any person with morals of any kind. Now, the second red flag is the repeated attempts to link Cali to child trafficking. So, Shaun links Cali to child trafficking several times, despite the fact that she was categorically not trafficked as a child. And Cali never corrects him on this. In the suicide video, which I have covered previously in another video, Shaun says how he's seen firsthand the devastating effects that child trafficking has on a victim when they become an adult. After saying this, he reminds everyone about the Gofundme, of course, and he also suggests in this series of videos that if you don't believe what Cali's saying, then you're playing into the hands of paedophiles, which is a strange thing to say in the first place, but even more so when it's completely irrelevant. Why is there a continued attempt to link Cali to organised paedophilia when this is not relevant to her story? She's never been involved in organised paedophilia. We have heard that she was abused as a child, unfortunately. That is something we were told, but it wasn't linked to any organised ring or child trafficking in any way whatsoever. And Cali's never said it has been. So I think the reason that Cali doesn't challenge it is because she's only there to go with the flow, and Shaun is there to steer things. Cali's got a few stories to tell, that much is true, but she's not there to tell her story. She's there to tell enough stories to get enough sympathy, to get enough donations. If Cali was a genuine guest, and by that I mean someone who's on the show to get her story out and to expose the truth about something, then she would of course correct Shaun immediately when he mentions child trafficking in relation to her. Nobody who wants to get their story out there is going to sit and let the host muddy the waters with such a huge misrepresentation. And we know that Shaun knows it's untrue, which is why he does it quickly. He says it quickly and he moves past it onto the next thing. He's a classic fast talker. And I think this is one of the reasons that the suicide video was deleted from the channel, because it's an obvious hole in the story. Just as an aside as well, if you want to see the full video where Shaun tearfully and deliberately links Cali to child trafficking, it is on the What is Truth podcast, so he has covered it. The gentleman who runs that, he's covering the whole saga there, and it's a really good listen. And he actually shows the full unedited video where Shaun's crying his eyes out. I think it's in episode 19 of the What is Truth podcast, so you should definitely check that out. Now, the third red flag is the fact that Cali has kept the name Diamond. We know Diamond's not Cali's real surname, and Cali's not her real first name. So first of all, straight off the bat, we've got a guest on with a completely fake name. So we've got a guest on with a completely fake name who there's a GoFundMe for. Interesting. But in the first video, Cali herself tells us that the traffickers gave her the name Diamond, or Diamond Banks. Now, Cali claims that she was given this name because diamonds are created under great pressure. Laying aside the fact that this sounds like a boast, we are supposed to believe that Cali still uses the name that was given to her by the traffickers, including using it on her appearance on Shaun Attwood's channel, which has 500,000 people subscribed to it. That's strange. Not only that, but on her own website, the website that Shaun set up for her to supposedly help other victims of trafficking, which of course has the GoFundMe link on it, her contact email address is Cali Diamond Banks. It contains the words Cali Diamond Banks as the name. Why would you still publicly use this name, which was given to her by a terrifying, abusive gang that she's trying to escape from? These people have supposedly kidnapped her, held her captive, threatened her child, burgled her mother, beat her so hard that she got brain damage and almost lost an eye, forced her into sexual servitude over a period of 5 years, and kept her in a state of inebriation while holding her down and injecting her with cocaine and heroin against her will. but she still uses the name that they gave her, and they gave her that name as a way to taunt her. And she also uses it as an email address to handle incoming inquiries from trafficking victims that she's trying to help. She also makes multiple public experiences on Shaun's podcast, which is watched by hundreds of thousands of people in the UK and elsewhere, and she's still using the name Cali Diamond Banks. It's not exactly hiding, and it's not exactly trying to get away. And why would you keep, if you were in fear for your life and desperate to escape these people, why on earth would you keep the name that they gave you? But maybe she just thinks that the name is just far too cute to lose. Who knows? Now, the fourth red flag is the fact that Cali doesn't go to the police, even though her young son's safety has been threatened. At one point, Shaun did ask Cali why she couldn't escape the traffickers even now, and her response was that every time she tries, they put pressure on her family. She gives the example that they've told her they're watching her child through his PlayStation. And she says she doesn't know if it's true or not, so obviously she's insinuating that it may be true. Obviously, the first suggestion would just be to unplug the PlayStation, or perhaps get rid of it. But really, you would think if your child's been threatened that you would go to the police. But she doesn't do it. She says the police have got their own agenda, just like all the anti-trafficking charities and organisations. She's even refused to go into witness protection, apparently. And yet here she is mentioning her son on the podcast, mentioning details of how the traffickers are threatening him. I don't even think she should mention her son in this context at all. But there we go. Is that the actions of someone who's scared for their life and scared for their son's safety? Or is it just an emotive topic that will help elicit more donations from the viewers? So the next red flag is that Shaun has Cali living at his house, which is bad enough, but especially when you consider the fact that she's actually got a cocaine conspiracy charge on her. So it is odd enough that he's got a guest from his show staying in his home, but especially so when you learn that she is actually under investigation currently, having recently been arrested on suspicion of attempting to supply 2 ounces of cocaine. This is inexplicable behaviour from Shaun Attwood. He's supposed to be a reformed man, a successful businessman, an author. He talks at schools and he does charity work, yet he's got a guest from his show taking shelter in his home who is actively being investigated for dealing cocaine. I think anyone in their right mind, if somebody came to them and said, "Can I please stay at yours?" and you found out that they were actively being investigated for conspiracy to supply almost 5 grand's worth of cocaine, street value, then you would potentially suggest that you didn't really want that business near any of your business, certainly not anywhere in your home, near your family. And I don't think you would film a video with them in which you pretended to take cocaine on a table that's littered with what you have said are ounce bags of supposedly fake cocaine. So that takes us on to the next red flag, where Cali actually admits, accidentally, I think, that only the girls who take drugs get drugged by the traffickers. She says the foreign girls don't take drugs, so they don't get drugged. The traffickers don't drug them. Now, I know addiction's a serious and bad issue for people. People can't control themselves when they're addicted. It's a very easy way to control people. And certainly the traffickers could be using addiction to control you, but you can't say that you're being drugged by them any more than you can say a drug dealer drugs their customers. It's absolutely false to put into the title of the podcasts that Cali is being drugged, in my opinion, because she's just admitted there that if she didn't take drugs, then it wouldn't happen. Now, if they were drugging people, these traffickers, they would drug the foreign girls as well, surely. They wouldn't just say, well, if you don't like drugs, then no, it's okay, you won't get any. Not how it works. Now, the next red flag is the fact that they strongly dismiss the notion of Cali getting help from anti-trafficking organisations. Shaun and Cali, when they're talking about what can be done to help her, make sure to dismiss any notion that Cali could be helped by anti-trafficking charities or organisations that specialise in the field, because Cali believes they're all part of a corrupt system that actually helps trafficking to happen. It's an extremely irresponsible claim, and no evidence or further information is provided to back it up, other than the fact that the Samaritans apparently didn't know who Cali was when the local council contacted them, and Cali finds this sinister because the police had told her that they'd actually referred her onto the Samaritans. So it's extremely flimsy evidence for making such a bold claim, but it does provide a convenient way to dismiss any genuine offers from the audience, any genuine offers of help. So if someone's getting in touch to say, um, I work for a charity, or I've got contacts with this charity and that charity, basically what Shaun and Cali are doing is saying, don't bother. Um, they're putting it out there straight away that that's not the kind of help they're looking for. So very interesting. The next red flag is the fact that Shaun just casually mentions fundraisers despite racking his brains to think of a way to help Cali himself. He never suggests a fundraiser himself, but he does casually mention them. So even though the Gofundme was not set up until the third video, Shaun mentions fundraisers in both the first video and the second video. In the first video, he mentions a fundraiser right at the end, which was set up to help pay for the cancer treatment of Maria Farmer. Shaun casually links to this by saying that although he's never had any guest on before Cali, who's currently in the grips of a trafficking gang, he has had some extremely brave guests on, like Maria Farmer, and thank you to everyone for donating to her fundraiser. Just the way he slips it in. The fundraiser has nothing to do with Shaun. It was set up by Virginia Roberts, I think. Certainly wasn't set up by Shaun Attwood. And yet here he is plugging it at the end of Cali's first interview. It couldn't be more obvious that this is done to slip the idea into people's minds. And it's all the more ridiculous because he's repeatedly said out loud that he can't think of any way whatsoever to help Cali. He said more than once that he's just racking his brains to think of something, but nothing comes to mind. Yet the fundraiser for Maria Farmer is at the forefront of his mind as he's closing the first episode. Does he mention Maria Farmer's fundraiser in other videos with other guests that are, unrelated? I don't know. There's also a bit in the second Cali video where Shaun's reading out viewer comments. He hesitates and he looks for a certain comment and he says, where are we? She should start a GoFundMe. And then he skips past it. So he's sort of half under his breath, acting as if he's reading out viewer comments. And he may well be, because the chances are somebody has suggested this, because it's just basically blatantly obvious that that's where you're steering people towards. But yeah, just reading it out, half under his breath, she should start a GoFundMe, and then quickly moves on without mentioning it again. Just blatantly obvious that it's done to put the idea out there without actually mentioning it himself. Plausible deniability.
Let's see. She should start a GoFundMe page. Thank you, Shaun and Cali, brave woman. So
he's trying to maintain distance between himself and the GoFundMe on purpose, because if it was a legitimate guest, then I'm sure he would have just thought about it and mentioned it. So the next red flag, it's the constant overcompensating, which I'm sure people have noticed, especially if they've rewatched things with a more cynical eye. Shaun tries extra hard to show proof, or claims that he's got proof. He tries extra hard to say that Cali's story is true. He quotes viewers as saying that how real the story is. He says that there's nothing else he could do to prove the story. and he says there's no reason to doubt Cali. He shows many photographs of black eyes and blood, and there's one moment where he tells us the traffickers get the girls hooked on drugs, and he says you saw the devastating consequences of that in a photograph shown about 30 minutes in the last video. This is his attempt to say, here's evidence that Cali is getting drugged by the traffickers, but the video is literally just Cali with a black eye. It doesn't show any connection to drugs, but he's said it very quickly and naturally as if it was actually a video that, a photograph that showed evidence that Cali was being drugged. It was more fast talking by him, I think. He just speaks about things as if they're connected, as if some proof has been shown, and the overcompensating. He also says that there's no reason not to believe Cali, and he couldn't do more to prove that the story is true. He says the police have got all the evidence, just things like that, constantly throughout the whole series of videos, especially from the second video onwards when it became clear, I think, after the first one. A lot of people just weren't buying this. Now, the next red flag is it is actually just Shaun's fast talking. I think that's a red flag in itself. With the black eye video before, where he tried to say that that was evidence of her being drugged. He also tells us that Cali's had some trouble since the last podcast, and I've got a photograph with a lot of blood on it to show you later on in this video. So the way he says that, it's as if the photograph that's got a lot of blood on it is evidence of what happened to Cali since the last podcast.
But we have formed an action plan because of the predators. Cali did get in trouble in the days since the last interview we did, and I've got a photo with a lot of blood on it to show during this interview.
But actually, when the video is shown later on, Cali appears to slip up and says that the video was taken from around 3 years ago. So I think she said something like she woke up and she didn't know what had happened to her and took photographs of the blood. But the way Shaun made it sound like the blood photo was actually linked to a recent incident with Cali. It was just smooth, it was confident, and if Cali hadn't contradicted it later on, it would have slipped by completely unnoticed. He does try and say later on that it was a recent photograph again, but Cali's already contradicted it, so there's a lie somewhere. That is a red flag in itself. And then there's obviously the sense of peril around Cali, so it's another red flag. They've got a sense of urgency surrounding Cali's situation. We're told that incidents are happening between podcasts, and it seems to be that they say this, I think they've said it between, on 2 podcasts. Apparently stuff's going on all the time. It just seems to be a classic tactic of making people feel like they need to give money now. There's a sense of urgency around Cali. She's in danger. You need to help now. Donate now. Please help. Sometimes the incidents that happen or that they claim have happened are contradicted later on, like the blood photo that I mentioned before, which was 3 years old. And then there was allegedly an incident that had just happened between 2 of the other podcasts, where a half-hearted description was just given of what was supposed to be a completely serious incident. 2 things apparently happened during the filming of, or between the filming of one of the podcasts and another one, where Cali apparently, she says she met a man in a hotel, and her story's all jumbled up, but she met a man in a hotel and effectively he beat and robbed her. And then she shows a photograph of her with a very light black eye, which has supposedly happened between this podcast and the last one. And then she says the next day after that assault, she found herself vomiting suddenly. And she says that this was because she was injected with something in an attempt to kill her. But no further information was given about this massive claim of attempted murder, and Shaun doesn't seem interested in learning any more about it. But it's just another incident that allegedly happened between interviews that sounds serious, that they think people are going to buy. And it just sounds like an absolute load of rubbish. Which gets me on to the next red flag, which is the tall tales and the fact that Shaun explains them away, or tries to, and not very well either. So throughout the series of Cali interviews, Cali tells extremely cartoonish stories that sound like the imaginary stories of a child. She talks about vampires, Satan, psychics with crucifixion scars, dreams where she was abducted by aliens and woke up with injuries consistent with alien abduction, a man with two shadows, giant FBI trucks full of cocaine, little dogs being cut open alive to retrieve large packages of drugs that are almost the same size as the dogs. She has insinuated that Prince Andrew has been involved in some of the parties that she's been at. She has suggested that she was the catalyst for the BBC scandal in which Jimmy Savile was exposed. She says she had a conjoined twin birth who was taken to the underworld while Cali was left to fight the demons in this world. I'm just going to stop here. There's no point carrying on with this, but you get the gist. So Shaun's explanation for these kinds of stories that Cali's saying, he says it's because she's been pumped full of so much drugs by the traffickers that she says wild things. So we're expected to believe that she's sitting on a podcast just speaking things as if they're true, which aren't true because of the amount of drugs she's on. It makes it sound as if she doesn't know how to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Now, if she's that far gone, why would we believe anything that she says? How are we expected to believe that everything else she says is true? So it's just the crazy sounding stuff that we're told to dismiss, but not the rest of it. Not a very convincing argument, I'm afraid. But Shaun tells us, he reminds us that it's all part of the traffickers' plan to get the women so drugged up and speaking so much bullshit that they'll never be believed in court. And he basically points the finger at anyone who disagrees. He says, you know, if you don't believe Cali, you're just playing into the hands of predators, you're playing into the hands of paedophiles, which is a strange thing to insinuate. And that brings us on to the next red flag, actually, which is the shaming of the non-believers. So as I said just before, he makes a point of saying that by not believing the story, people are playing into the hands of all these bad people. He says paedophiles, predators, etc. I don't know why paedophiles keep getting mentioned, considering once again there's no suggestion by Cali that she was trafficked as a child or has any connection to organised paedophile rings. But Shaun says these predators rely on people having a knee-jerk reaction and disbelieving victims, and he's addressing the audience when he says this. He's saying that when it comes to these videos with Cali, he's telling his audience not to listen to their gut instinct and not to question what she says. If something doesn't make sense, basically he's just saying you're an asshole for pointing it out. And for someone who purports to be exposing the truth, this is very strange behaviour. It's completely counter to the truth, and it's counter to free thinking. It's not a line he would take if he was investigating Epstein or Prince Andrew. Any strange stories there, he would be straight on saying, you better believe that, it's got to be the truth. The 14th red flag, because I have numbered them, is the fact that the title of the videos change ever so slightly when the Gofundme becomes active. So yeah, part 1 and 2 with Cali were called I Am Being Drugged and Trafficked, as in it's actively going on, I'm being drugged and trafficked. The Gofundme comes into play in part 3, and from then on, the name of the podcast was changed very slightly to I Was Drugged and Trafficked. So why has it suddenly become past tense? It's a small, subtle change, but it is there, and it has obviously been done manually by a person for a reason. I think you can just make your own assumptions as to why they've changed it from when the Gofundme came into play. Suddenly it becomes past tense. Why would they do that? My personal opinion is that it's to, again, provide some plausible deniability or some kind of defense if needed later. If it later turns out that Cali was not actively being trafficked or drugged while the GoFundMe was getting donations. That's what I believe. The next red flag, number 15, is the fact that Shaun does not let Cali talk about a particular sexual assault. So, for someone who claims themselves to be an advocate for victims of abuse and an exposure of corruption, especially sexual corruption, and he has a guest on that's supposed to tell her story, Shaun really does not seem interested in letting Cali get aspects of her story out there. In fact, he downright stops her speaking when she opens up about an incident in which someone who was claimed to be one of the traffickers sexually assaulted her while she slept, and she woke up to find the assault ongoing. He just cuts her off and says, "Stop talking about that." And the reason for that's very interesting. So Cali was clearly getting something out into the public at this point, which was meant to be the whole point of these interviews. But before she could say anything else, Shaun says, "Let's not say anything more about that person. Let's just say that I've reached out to them and I'm trying to get an interview with them to get their opinion on the Madeleine McCann suspect." So that really actually annoyed me. It was the first point where I actually felt sorry for Cali, or most sorry for Cali anyway, just being shut down like that while she was getting something out, and I believe she was telling the truth that this person did sexually assault her. Now, whether this person is actually a trafficker is a different story, but this person, I believe, Callie was telling the truth when she was getting that story out there, and she was going on to say something else about it, and she was cut off by Shaun Attwood, and it was actually disgraceful behaviour to see that. And he's supposed to be a fighter for victims. I mean, we've come to expect disgraceful behaviour from Shaun, but this was really something else.
So,
So this guy that they mention, I woke up with him playing with me when I've been asleep.
let's probably not say anything about him now. Let's just say that I have contacted him to see if he's available for an interview about his take on the German suspect.
The interview, as I said, is supposed to be about getting Callie's truth out there. But as soon as that might stop Shaun getting an interview with someone else about a completely different topic, he shuts her down and she shuts up. This just proves that the interview is not about Callie. It's not about truth. Shaun doesn't give a damn about the truth. He doesn't give a damn about victims. He doesn't give a damn about victims' experiences. And something very strange is going on with this story, because the next red flag is the fact that Shaun has met one of the alleged trafficking gang, but chooses not to expose him. So this is the most interesting thing to come out of these whole Cali videos to me, and it was the fact that Shaun Attwood says he met one of Cali's trafficking minders the other day with Cali. The minders are the people who watch Cali to keep her in check on behalf of the trafficking gang, so they are part of the trafficking gang. The minders, Cali has said, these are the same people that have punched her in the face and given her brain damage. So, Shaun's met one of them. Why has Shaun met one of the traffickers? This trafficker, interestingly, actually turns out to be a good friend of the German suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And it's very strange that Callie's got a link to that, such a direct link, because the German guy apparently lived with this trafficker for a long time on a traveller camp, from what I'm told, which is very strange. But leaving that aside, why actually has Shaun Attwood met one of Callie's traffickers? This is just mind-blowing. And how did he get his number? How on earth did he reach out to the trafficker to ask for an interview about Madeleine McCann? Did he just get his number? Did he ask him for his phone number? How did that come about? How does he have the phone number? Because Cali certainly didn't seem to know that Shaun had actually asked him for an interview, judging by her reaction when he cut her off and said he was reaching out to the guy. She just looked at the ground. She didn't look to me as if she actually knew that Shaun had reached out to this guy. So he's going out behind Cali's back, independently of Cali, reaching out to one of the traffickers and asking him for an interview. There's so many questions that need answered here, but why is Shaun not exposing this guy? He's supposed to be exposing things. This is his opportunity to expose. But instead of exposing him, he said to Cali, "Don't say his name, don't say anything more about him, don't tell anyone about the fact that he sexually assaulted you, because I want him on for an interview." I think someone needs to get answers to this specific point. We need someone who's got a much bigger reach than I have to tighten the thumb screws on Shaun about how on earth he was able to interact with Cali's traffickers in such a way, and why he dismissed the sexual assault of his guest so in such a cutthroat fashion, told her not to talk about it. I really would like the answers to that. And I'm just going to close with the final red flag, which is, why is a GoFundMe even needed? Why is a £10,000 fundraiser needed for Cali to escape a trafficking gang? It doesn't cost 10 grand to move house. It's not going to stop her family being threatened. She's refused witness protection. She's refused multiple offers of a home. I think she says 4 or 5 times she's been offered to be rehoused and she's refused them. And she's got her own independent source of income, which is higher than most middle-class workers in the UK. So I'll read this from Cali's own adult work profile, which is still live, and she's still logging into it. The last login was, I think it was yesterday. It says on her profile, and I'll quote it, it says in all caps, it says, "Asking for reduced rates will automatically tell me you are not my standard of clientele. There are girls in your price range. You do not need to insult me. I am not desperate or a charity." So why is a GoFundMe being set up for Cali? And why is it still active? She charges £1,200 a night, regardless of where she meets the client, in home or out home. It's not exactly low rates, and she doesn't want anything less than that. She will not accept custom from anyone that wants to pay less than that. She's used to charging what she wants. She's obviously used to getting what she wants. She's confident that she can maintain that price. She's clearly still earning. She's still active on her profile. So why is there a GoFundMe for her? What on earth does she need 10 grand for? That's 1,200. What we're talking? That's like four nights work for her, basically. Maybe 9. My maths is off, but yeah, it's not good. They've made 5 grand out of it, which I think is a disgrace already. I don't see why Cali needs 5 grand. We know that that's going into Shaun's pocket, although he might just be giving it to Cali now just so he can say, look, she's getting it now. But I certainly don't believe that the GoFundMe was ever needed, and I can't see the reason for a GoFundMe being required for Cali. I don't know why Cali needs 10 grand to escape the traffickers. It makes no sense whatsoever. I made another video on the GoFundMe issue, but the fundraiser was actually set up 2 weeks after Shaun failed to get 10 grand on another fundraiser. He didn't even, in fact, he only made £45 on that fundraiser when he was asking for £10,000, and it was supposed to be for studio equipment he was asking for, which again I don't understand, because I thought he had studio equipment. Nobody wanted to donate to that one, and 2 weeks later this one pops up. It just seems like Shaun needs 10 grand and he can't think of an easier way to make it. He's criminally minded, so he's doing something with a criminal technique in it. It's an odd amount of money for someone who should have some wealth behind them. We're led to believe that he's a millionaire. I don't believe he is at all. I think he tries to present that way, but I don't believe he is in the slightest. He only appears to have one suit for a start. There's no way to know the financial situation of people based on their public persona, and it really does seem that Shaun is trying to come up with 10 grand as quickly as possible, because from whatever his earning capacity is, he doesn't have a way to make 10 grand quickly. And thinking about it, I don't know what he would do to make 10 grand quickly if he needed it. So it seems that, the GoFundMe is the way to go. So anyway, yeah, those are my red flags. A bit of a ramble, this video. There are a lot more things wrong with Shaun and Cali's story than what I've gone over here. There's people pointing out stuff all the time in the comments. But everything does kind of merge into these points. So if you have enjoyed the video, please like it, please subscribe, of course, and please do share it. The more people that see this, the better chance we've got of more people putting their head above the parapet and speaking out against Shaun Attwood in more of a public fashion. I would like to see more people like Darren G putting themselves out there and being honest about this situation. Very, very interesting to see Darren G coming out and saying that. Anyway, thanks folks. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
I'm a straight up kid. I'm not going to chat shit to you. Shaun Attwood is bent as fuck.